Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today, we're looking at the top 10 things that would happen if there was no minimum wage.
Number 10. Lower unemployment. Here's a quick question. What connects the European Union countries of Sweden, Italy, Denmark, Finland, Cyprus, Austria, and prior to January 2015, Germany? The answer is that none of them have minimum wage laws. Yep, even Sweden. Now what else connects them? On average, they have lower levels of unemployment than the rest of the EU. This has been the case for as long as people have been collecting data on EU unemployment, but it became especially pronounced after the 2008 financial crisis. By 2012, the countries without minimum wage had unemployment levels that were on average up to a third lower than those with. Clearly, something was driving this trend. Minimum wage laws represent a cost a business has to absorb. When such laws are strong, managers are less willing to hire. Conversely, if you scrap the minimum wage, then employers are much more willing to take a punt on someone with no experience or lack of skills or no formal education, as it only costs them as much as they're willing to pay. This can take an axe to unemployment figures, getting the economically unproductive into the workforce. Number 9. Rise of the unions. The no minimum wage countries cited above are all, by and large, economic success stories with a decent standard of living. But there's another side to them too, one that might be an anathema to those who dislike socialism. They're also home to extremely robust, powerful workplace unions. Non-minimum wage developed countries allow their citizens a good standard of living by letting them use collective bargaining to secure a wage. Nearly every worker in Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and Italy, plus minimum wageless non-EU states Norway and Iceland, is unionized. In effect, this means they have a minimum wage negotiated for them by their union. The flexibility comes in allowing different industries to negotiate different rates according to their circumstances and the type of people they employ. In practice, this means that to stop the abolishment of the minimum wage from affecting the living standards of low earners, a strong culture of unions might have to rise up to keep unscrupulous employers in check. If people currently on the national minimum feared they were in danger of losing money, unionization would become near inevitable. Not a free market paradise at all, in other words. Number 8. More starter jobs for the young. Youth unemployment currently stands at around 10% in the USA. In parts of the EU, such as Greece, it is as high as 50.3%. For the highest in the world, though, you'd have to visit Bosnia, where it stands at nearly 60%. Evidently, young adults with nothing to do and no way to contribute to the economy are a significant global problem. But what would happen if you abolished the minimum wage? There's a good argument that a lot of kids might suddenly find themselves with jobs. Teenagers and young adults who aren't in education typically have few skills, need lots of training, and are prone to flakiness. This is a grand generalization, but that's how hiring people see it. So when faced with the prospect of paying $7.25 per hour for someone who needs work and might have attitude issues, or paying $7.25 an hour for a responsible adult who has been in the industry for a while, most employers choose the latter. Why wouldn't you, right? But in a world without a minimum wage, suddenly the calculations are different. For example, $2 an hour is a lot easier to write off if things screw up, and the potential rewards, a hardworking, loyal employee, are worth far more to you. Suddenly it makes sense to start hiring those kids, potentially leading to a huge decrease in youth unemployment and giving kids the opportunities they might not otherwise have. Number 7. A sluggish economy. There's one immutable fact of life. Those with more money tend to spend that money. This means dollars pouring into the local economy, whizzing around and making everything from the local 7-Eleven to the diner on Main Street to your gym teacher's illicit marijuana business becoming more profitable. It's good for business owners, it's good for local government. One easy way to trigger this spending spree? Well, instigate a minimum wage. In 2007, Congress authorized a mild increase in the minimum wage. The knock-on effect was increased consumer spending in 2008 and 2009, despite a massive recession walloping the American middle class right in the face. Those increases, in other words, helped shield the economy when it needed it most. Governments know you need money in your bank account to keep the economy ticking over. That's why very few developed economies are willing to axe both the minimum wage and trade unions together. If people feel squeezed, they'll stop spending. Abolish the minimum wage and many people will feel squeezed alright, potentially leading to a sluggish economy that benefits nobody. With warnings already rising of another recession just around the corner, now would be the worst possible time for it to happen. Number 6. Delayed automation. At some point in a lifetime, a robot is going to take your job. We don't care what you do, one day AI is going to get so advanced it'll be child play for a machine to do whatever the heck it is that you do. and it's going to happen sooner than you think. Obviously, this poses a lot of problems for future governments and businesses, but that's for another video. Right now, we're only interested in the next few years, and that's where the issues arise. Plenty of jobs have already been automated. Plenty more are on the way or potentially could be if employers were willing to cough up the cash. The first that are going to go, minimum wage jobs. At some point, very, very soon, it's going to make a lot more financial sense for a company to use an automated system instead of a human. Not with all jobs, some, such as cleaning, remain hard for a robot to do effectively, but plenty of others will be affected. Although this robot revolution is probably inevitable, scrapping the minimum wage could delay it in the medium term. If there's no set amount a workplace has to pay a worker, it takes longer for machine employees to become cost-effective. This means the unskilled can remain in jobs for longer, and humanity gets a few extra years to prepare for our new mechanical overlords. Number 5. Difficult negotiations. One of the big positives about eliminating the minimum wage is it allows employers to pay each employee what their labor is worth. However, this puts some workers at an unhappy disadvantage. Those who are young, shy, or inexperienced can easily be taken advantage of by unscrupulous employers looking to pay them far less than their work is worth. The trouble with a sudden total scrapping of the minimum wage is that everyone would be forced to negotiate their wage with their employer before starting. No problem if you've got a tradable skill or confidence by the bucket load, but if you're one of those people who often gets taken advantage of, well, let's just say you're going to be completely and utterly screwed. Obviously, this is only a downside if you have any feelings of empathy towards the terminally meek. But even then, there's another side of this to consider: the employers. And you better believe negotiating dozens of different wages for different employees is going to be a giant pain in the gluteus maximus. If the business is small enough, it can also bring unwanted certainty to budgets. After all, how can you plan for the future if you don't know what your new employee is going to be receiving? $2 per hour, $3, or $7.50? Number 4. No more undercutting wages. Globalization pissed a lot of people off. For all of its undoubted benefits, it let big business undercut its employees' wages by outsourcing to Latin America or Southeast Asia or wherever. There's a reason that calling up AT&T will get you through to some dude in the Czech Republic, or calling BT from Britain will get you put through to India. It's cheaper to hire someone in a smaller or less developed economy to do the same work, and that means people in the company's home country lose those call center manufacturing or clothes-making jobs. In a world without the minimum wage, those jobs don't have to leave the country. True, Americans might well have to accept conditions and pay that they are unused to, but many might be willing in order to just have some job. There's a fairly convincing argument to be made that outsourcing and undercutting are almost entirely down to minimum wage laws. Abolish those laws and you'll staunch the flow of jobs overseas, making it cost-effective for a company to keep operating in its homeland. For those living in a depressed post-manufacturing small town, it could completely change their lives. Number 3. Increased inequality. Inequality is killing us. The best-selling economics book, The Spirit Level, effectively argued that increasing inequality can lead to worse health and lower life expectancy for people all up and down the social scale, even the super rich. As a result, governments across the world have pledged to tackle ingrained inequality. One way they could reverse all the progress: abolishing the minimum wage. We can infer this from the case of Britain. In 1998, the UK introduced its first minimum wage at £3.60 an hour, now £7.20. According to The Economist, inequality subsequently shrank across the scale. In other words, it wasn't just the working class and working poor who got more equal. The middle class found themselves closer to the upper class, and those at the bottom of society also benefited. The entire scale of inequality shrank, creating a society noticeably less prone to the problems identified by the authors of The Spirit Level. As a result, we can infer things that would travel in the opposite direction if the minimum wage disappeared overnight. Given that many already blame America's crazy political polarization on its Hunger Games-style levels of inequality, this may not be a good thing. Number 2. Burdens shifted from employer to government. Do you believe it is the responsibility of governments or companies to help people out of poverty? Let's assume it's someone's responsibility, if only to stop exciting Victorian things like rickets and slums from staging a comeback. If you believe it's up to the government to shoulder the costs of the poorest in society, then abolishing the minimum wage might be the best way to achieve this. The answer lies in tax credits, which are currently a big part of the American and British welfare systems. Tax credits essentially pay for a big chunk of the working poor's taxes, leaving them a few $1,000s a year better off. They also allow employers to pay their workers less without affecting the workers' quality of life. Instead, the burden is shouldered by the government. Not only are both the employee and employer better off, evidence shows that tax credits generally get more into work. A win from the government perspective. If you remove the minimum wage while creating and sustaining a strong tax credit system, you could reap all the benefits of a world without minimum wage without having to absorb the negatives. Ethically, if that's your thing, it also removes the thorny issue of government interfering with the rights of employers, something anathema to those on the right. Number 1. Absolutely nothing happens. After all those possible positives and negatives of a minimum wageless world, we're now about to tell you that it could all be horse manure. According to one analysis, completely scrapping the minimum wage could potentially have no discernible effect whatsoever. This is related to the idea of wages being sticky. Basically, once wages are raised to a certain level, they rarely drop back down below that point again. It might be due to workplace pressure, no one wanting to work for a company that mercilessly slashes wages, social pressure, the bad PR cutting wages might earn, or just employers and employees getting conditioned to that wage being the right one for that job. Whatever the case, it's a real phenomenon, and some believe this would apply to the minimum wage. In a nutshell then, the minimum wage might vanish tomorrow, and employers at Walmart might still keep earning $7.25 per hour. Not a particularly dramatic result, true, but perhaps the only outcome likely to keep both sides of the debate happy.
So I really hope you found that video informative and interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and do leave us a comment to let us know what you think. I know this can be a divisive issue. We'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments. Also, check out some of our other videos that are over there on the right. One of those is about the minimum wage being $15 an hour, so kind of a counter to this video, so be sure to check those out, and thank you for watching.